Right. Thank you and good afternoon. Yeah, I'm going to give you an overview of a new project which is starting up under the NFTN initiative. And that's the phase one status quo assessment for environmental compliance at existing foundries in South Africa. So just a quick overview, and some of this information has actually been updated. Like the initial information we had was that there were around 182 foundries in South Africa, and we see that was from 2015. And even unfortunately in the data we've seen today, that has now dropped to maybe around 107 or so. They're covering a range of sectors from iron to zinc to aluminium and bronze foundries. And what we've got is a sort of initial database which classifies them as different sizes from extra small, so like some of the artisanal foundries through to the larger foundries. And some of the initial feedback which NFTN has is that many of those foundries are probably not meeting the environmental requirements and environmental regulations. And in some cases, unfortunately, that's meant that the foundries have been closed, or in some cases they might be closed, or there's pressure from the environmental authorities to close them. And that's a situation we definitely want to avoid, because that has major negative socioeconomic impacts on the country. But at the same time, we also want to be making sure that we do manage the environmental impacts responsibly as well. So the purpose of this, or the background to this compliance study review, is to identify then what permits are required in terms of environmental licenses. And we're going to look across the range of the air quality permits, atmospheric emissions licenses, the authorizations under the National Environmental Management Act, if those are required, the environmental authorizations, and also other environmental licenses linked to water and waste. We want to be able to, at the moment we don't have a picture of what the levels of existing compliance are and what sort of risk that creates for the foundry industry as well, the sort of risk of litigation, or the risk of being closed by the environmental authorities. So the overall aim for this environmental compliance study then is to work together in a collaborative way and to assist the foundries in achieving environmental compliance. And then from that, it will lead to improved performance, increased competitiveness, especially if products are exported. And then overall, through this, to contribute to an optimal and responsible socioeconomic development for South Africa. So now I'm just going to give you an overview how we're going to go about doing the compliance assessment. So the first phase is to do a status quo study, and that's to understand what is the status quo in the foundries in South Africa at the moment in terms of environmental compliance. And we're going to be running that now over 6 months. Essentially, this conference is the starting day. This is like day one. And we're going to be running this through to March, end of March next year. The second phase then would be to develop a environmental management program or set of programs that could be applied at foundries to assist them in obtaining environmental compliance, either in attaining it or maintaining it if they have it already. And we would look at developing that then next year from April, NFTN taking the lead on that. And then the third phase would be to then look at working with the foundries to implement these plans to obtain environmental compliance. And that we see as would require like a 2 to 3 year, maybe a 4-year process of working together to achieve full environmental compliance. So what are the key principles that we want to bring to this compliance study? And the top of the list really, and most important, is that it's a collaborative approach. It's not a policing approach. It's not a kind of it's an approach of working together to resolve the issue in the positive way for the best socioeconomic benefits to South Africa. So we want to be working in a collaborative approach under the leadership of NFTN with the Foundries and with the key government authorities like the Department of Environmental Affairs, which is now the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, and with DTI, working closely with DTI through this all as well. The second key principle is that we're going to be gathering information through a survey questionnaire, and core to that approach is we're going to be having one-on-one discussions, interviews with Foundry managers and going to the Foundries, and I'll say a bit more about that later. We also want to frame this questionnaire and this compliance assessment within the context of developing a better understanding of the economic value of the Foundry to South Africa. So just in some initial discussions with DTI, they put on the table, there are also some wider questions we can ask at the same time around the economic value that the Foundries bring from direct economic aspects like employment through to secondary benefits. The other part about the principles and the scope is that earlier this morning, Alf Hartzenberg spoke about the energy efficiency study which they're doing with the Foundries, and they also were looking to do a survey with the Foundries around energy efficiency, and what through the discussions we've had over the last couple of weeks, we're looking at combining the two, and so that when we go to the Foundries with a survey, it'll be covering environmental compliance, but also questions around energy efficiency, with the intention of assisting from Alf Hartzenberg's side, that assisting Foundries with improving energy efficiency. And then lastly, we see the results of this as feeding into DTI's high-level sort of industrial strategy for Foundries and further support. So what are the benefits to the Foundries from being involved in this survey? Well, certainly the first is to try to avoid the situation where Foundries are closed or having environmental compliance issues sort of forced upon them. And our overall intention is to create this better understanding of the Foundry business, the levels of compliance, better understanding of the economic contribution of the Foundries to South Africa, and then to go with that information, to have that package of information and have it well substantiated from the survey, then to be able to go to the relevant authorities who are involved in the compliance, like National Department of Environment, Fisheries and Forestry, as well as metros or provincial authorities, and we go to them and be able to then negotiate a compliance process in situations where Foundries are not compliant, and negotiate how one can, what are the Foundries committing to, and what are reasonable levels of environmental quality that need to be attained, and then what sort of time period is required to obtain that. And so the concept of a sort of leave from compliance period might be put on the table, where Foundries have 2 to 3 years to attain a level of legal compliance that they might not attain at the moment, or something like that. So that the idea is then to use the results of the survey to be able to put that on the negotiating table, and then work together to negotiate an optimal, responsible way forward. Okay, so I'm just going to run through this quick, more like a sort of task. So how are we going to do this? We've got about 4 tasks we're going to go through in the status quo assessment over the next 6 months. And I maybe won't go into all the detail, but essentially what our first step is to get an updated national inventory. You've got, no, we need that, yeah. And and Alf Hartzenberg spoke about, he's also been doing, this morning he said he'd been doing cold calls as part of his initial energy efficiency discussions with the Foundries. So we will also have a team of my colleagues in my group, and we'll work with Alf's group from the energy efficiency side. My group is the environmental management side. And we will compile a stakeholder database, which we'll work closely with the Foundry Institute in preparing that. But we want to be able to compile a database of which foundries, what is the current status of foundries in South Africa today. And we will then also develop the survey questionnaire. And then the questionnaire will cover those aspects I spoke about on the principle. We'll ask about the key features of Foundry. We'll ask about levels of environmental compliance around air, water, waste, environmental authorizations. And we'll also ask questions just to understand the macroeconomic and socioeconomic contribution of the foundries to the economy and the valuable role they play. And then we'll also link it in with the energy efficiency questions from ALF. So I think one of the first things we'll do is we actually want to go and present this this assessment, the compliance assessment, to the meetings of the different institutes. And so we want to go to a meeting of the SAIF and present there what we're planning to do, as well as other bodies like the Zinc Association of South Africa. And through Sandy and NFTN, our intention is to set up introductory, or to join their meetings and present at their meetings to raise awareness around what is being done. Okay, then the second part, then once we've got the database and we've introduced the study, then the second phase then is to understand the operational status of the foundries, fundamentally whether they're open or closed or temporarily closed, then to identify their current level of environmental compliance, what permits do they have, what is their compliance level with those permits, have they lapsed, and we'll do that we'll also be gathering information from the authorities as well to understand, well, what information do the authorities have, and then we want to then also look at the spatial location of the foundries with regards to legislation that might come through at like a local government planning level, which may be applicable to the foundries as well. So we would understand where they are, and are they possibly in an area which is designated as a air quality management zone under local government legislation or not. And that also just helps us understand what the compliance risks might be to the foundries. And then we'll also review the atmospheric emissions licenses. And one of the issues is that often they distributed via the metros, and we want to just be sure that or check whether there's consistency in the atmospheric emissions licenses in the way they're handled in different parts, in different metros, and check that they, what is sort of reasonable minimum requirements and consistency across them. Okay, and then the last part will be then to go out. We'll just probably introduce the survey with what we call a background information document, which is essentially giving information to all the participants about the purpose of the survey, the mandate from NFTN, and this background information. And then we'll go and conduct the survey, starting off with meeting with the institutes, joining their institute meetings, and then doing one-on-one meetings with the foundry managers, focusing mainly on the core area, obviously, of Gauteng, and also KZN and Western Cape. Though they're much smaller, but I think we plan to include them in the geographical scope of the survey as well. And then from that, we would want to be sourcing what existing permits have the foundries got, what monitoring reports have you got, and we'll also try and just source some information around understanding just the furnace types, the furnace conditions, the operating procedures, and then what's associated emissions and wastes there are, associated licenses, and what compliance measures have been adopted. So we would want to be covering that in our visit and our survey to the foundries. And we'll try and source all the relevant documents that we can to have a record of that. And out of that, we'll put out a status quo report. And our status quo report will be then available for people to comment and review through the Foundry Institute and give feedback so that it's a chance to fill in gaps or add information. And then that process we want to complete by the end of March. So just some of the, I think I've probably covered this, but some of the kind of questions we want to be covering in the scope of the survey would be understanding the furnace types and operating procedures at a course level, indications of sort of annual production, whether that's used in South Africa, whether products are used in South Africa or possibly exported, information about emissions based on available data, information about just water and waste management, and then types of environmental licenses which the foundries might have, and then what measures are being taken by the foundries towards compliances, and what are the challenges that they are experiencing in terms of achieving those compliance requirements. And we'll put that into a compliance matrix of whether it's complete compliance, partial, or not compliant with legal requirements. Okay, and that'll be put together in what we're going to call is the compliance sort of status quo assessment. And we'll provide sort of recommendations about how can we work together with the foundries to fill in the gap or improve compliance where required. Then the second phase that would be proposed after April next year would be to look at developing an environmental management program with the foundries and the relevant authorities, which would be like an action, which would include actions as to how does one attain and maintain environmental performance and meet specified levels of environmental quality. And we would have to develop different modules for that depending on the scale and type of the foundries, and so that it can be customized to the which sector the foundries in and the scale. And in that, there would be monitoring and evaluation requirements for aspects such as air quality. And there also could be, this morning we had a discussion around the Carbon Tax Act and reporting on greenhouse gas emissions. And there are these requirements now for greenhouse gas emission reporting. There's also potential to include that. So, like, how can foundries be assisted in their greenhouse gas emissions reporting? That could be part of an EMP as well. It could be to provide what support do the foundries need in that, and what sort of guidance can be provided. Okay, and then the third phase would be then a sort of 2 to 3 or even a 3 to 5 year period of working across the foundries, building capacity to enable these levels of environmental compliance to be attained where they're not already been attained, and to provide support in the sort of rollout of an environmental management program at the different foundries. And with that also then assistance with reporting on the carbon tax requirements and the greenhouse gas reporting and energy consumption. And hopefully we will be reporting through NFTN, they'll be reporting back in a few years' time about how much money has been saved through improved energy efficiency, and how improved environmental compliance has also increased the global competitiveness and opportunities to the foundries. Right, so the last slide, or second last slide, is just that, I mean, often, when in situations like this, there's often caution, and people often don't want to be part of a compliance survey because they'd rather stay below the radar or off the radar. So I think often industry is cautious about these kind of environmental compliance surveys, and that can discourage involvements in the study. And what I want to do, though, is just encourage you that we really want to make sure that we optimize the benefits from this process to the foundries, that it enables government through DTI and through negotiations with other government authorities like the Environmental Affairs to be able to come up with reasonable compliance standards and compliance requirements within reasonable time periods, and with support being provided to the foundries to maintain those levels of compliance. Thank you. Okay.